Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Today, I am updating my Steelers wide receiver targets list as we get closer and closer to the NFL trade deadline. We are now less than 2 weeks away from the NFL's trade deadline on November 4th. So Omar Khan definitely going to be working the phones, doing all those different things. We're going to be covering all the latest rumors, all the latest trade buzz, the intel that comes out, the reports that come out. And then, of course, if any breaking news happens, we'll be covering it here on Steelers Talk. And if it's a big enough name, we will be going live. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already, because if the con artist strikes and we get a new wide receiver and another weapon for Aaron Rodgers to throw to this season, we're going to be going live with that breaking news coverage. So if you don't want to miss any of that, make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already. And, the first thing that I want to say on today's show, guys, is I want to shoot down some of the ideas that are out there, that people are throwing out there, that I just don't think are going to happen. Now, I've been wrong before, but I just don't see a very realistic path for any of these gentlemen to be traded by their respective teams. A.J. Brown, I don't think is going to get traded. I think he'd have to pretty much demand his way out of Philly. And, there's certainly a little bit of animosity between him and the Eagles, but he just went off in a game versus the Minnesota Vikings, and they're winning games. And, I just don't know if that makes a ton of sense for Philly or, frankly, really a lot of sense for A.J. Brown. He's somebody that I think will get featured in that offense more as the season goes on. And he's one of the best receivers in the game, and they're winning games. So that doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Then Garrett Wilson is another name that people throw out there. He just got paid a lot of money, so he's another guy where it doesn't make sense for his current team to trade him unless he demands his way out of New York, which, listen, man, crazier things have happened. We'll see, but I think, that's probably not going to happen either. Then Jaylen Waddle also signed a big contract recently, and he's under contract through 2028 in Miami. He's a young player. He's a good locker room guy. There's really no incentive for Miami to trade him, even though they are heading towards a rebuild. He's going to be a foundational building block for their offense, and I don't think they want to trade him away. DJ Moore was maybe a name that would have been considered if the Bears kept losing and they would be selling at the deadline, but they're 4-2 and they've won 4 straight. So I think DJ's probably staying put there in Chicago. And then Romeo Doubs has been really, really good in Green Bay this year. He's got a great chemistry with Jordan Love now, and he's been super productive. So even with Christian Watson and Jaden Reed coming back in the weeks to come, I would expect Romeo Doubs to be a lock to stay in Green Bay. So now let's get into some actual candidates that actually, make some realistic sense to me in terms of guys that the Steelers could realistically target. So the first tier that I'm going to be talking about today is the jumping for joy category. All right, these are the guys that most people would widely consider, quote unquote, a legit wide receiver to pair with DK Metcalf. These guys are a bit more expensive on the trade market. You're going to have to give up a mid-round draft pick to go out and get them. But it could be worth it if the Steelers feel like they want to play more three wide receiver sets, if they feel like they want to get a different weapon other than Calvin Austin III to be the number 2 receiver in the Steelers offense. So we'll start with the guy in this tier that I think would be the most realistic, and that's Jakobi Meyers. I mean, Meyers is telling Las Vegas, media members that he wants to be traded still. Like, he's straight up coming out and saying it. Yes, I want to be traded. And then we've got guys like Ricky saying that the Raiders will be trading him, and we have all these reports out there that he's going to be, let go of at some point here in a trade. And I think that this trade makes sense for the Pittsburgh Steelers because he'd be a really good fit here as a number 2 receiver. He's a big body guy that can run block, but he also has machine gun feet, really good route runner, and he's also got phenomenal hands and a great contested catch rate. So I think he can develop some quick trust with Aaron Rodgers. He's not a vertical threat, but the Steelers have plenty of those, right? You've got DK Metcalf, you've got Calvin, you've got Roman, these guys that are fast and can separate down the field. Meyers would be more of a short and intermediate demon for the Steelers offense, which I think would be a great fit. But we also know that the Pittsburgh Steelers are interested. There was a report from Zachary Smith last week that the Steelers called about Meyers a couple weeks ago, and the Raiders essentially said, we're not trading him. for now. All right, so definitely keep an eye on Pittsburgh continuing their interest in Jakobi Meyers, but the Raiders are 2-5, and they're likely going to be selling guys. And also, Jakobi is just straight up saying, I want to be traded away from this team. He's on the final year of his deal, so I doubt, the Raiders are just going to keep him and, take him at a loss for nothing in free agency next year. They're going to try and get a draft pick out of him. And, like I said, he had that trade request in the preseason, and he's telling Las Vegas media that he wants out still. So this certainly seems like the one receiver for sure that's going to get traded. And I would say the price tag to get him would probably be an early day 3 pick, because he is getting a bit older, because the team that gets him might have to give him a new contract, all that stuff. I think that you could probably get Jakobi Meyers for if 5th round pick would be amazing. That would be a fleece job in my opinion, but probably more like a 4th round pick is probably what's going to be what gets the deal done for Jakobi Meyers. And if I'm the Steelers, I am doing that every single time because I think Jakobi Meyers is a really good football player, and I think he can help this team. You got a bunch of draft picks next year. You might as well use one of those to go and get somebody that can help you win this year with Aaron Rodgers. Then Chris Olave is another name that's thrown out there quite a bit. It's another guy that our favorite People's Insider Ricky has said will be traded before the trade deadline. Now, there's some reports out there that the Saints are trying to get an extension done with him. Olave himself has said he wants to be a Saint for life, so it's not like Meyers, who's trying to get his way out of his current situation. But this one also does make some sense, guys, because Chris Olave is a premier route runner, and to put a premier route runner, one of the best in the league, on the opposite side of DK Metcalf would be a very complimentary pair of skill sets that the Steelers could have for the next several years, all right? If you trade for Olave, you're giving him that new contract that he's looking for, and you'd be locking in DK Metcalf and Chris Olave as your number 1 and number 2 receiver duo for the foreseeable future. We also know that Pittsburgh has expressed interest in Chris Olave in the past. They've called to inquire about Olave's services in the past. That has been well reported. And, of course, the Saints are going to be selling. They're sitting at 1-6. And also because of his concussion history, he might be seen as a little bit of a risky rebuild item here, where if they give him a big contract and they're going to be trying to rebuild and he continues to get concussions and he's not on the field, that could be a big risk for the New Orleans Saints if they give him a ton of guaranteed money on his next deal. In terms of my price tag, I would give up a late day 2 or early day 3 pick. That's either a round 3 or round 4 pick. The Steelers have multiple of those picks in either of those situations, so I'd be willing to, offer up either a 3rd or a 4th. I would say if he can get Chris Olave, if Omar Khan can get Olave for just a 4th round pick and nothing else, that would be a phenomenal deal struck by the con artist. But there's another wide receiver that the Steelers have shown interest in, and that's Rashid Shaheed, the speed threat. And, the need for speed Shaheed is really, really fast. And, he's great as a punt return guy as well. He's a true deep threat and one of the best deep threats in the National Football League. One of the fastest guys in the league as well, can run after the catch a little bit. We know that the Pittsburgh Steelers called about his services as well a couple of weeks ago during the bye week. Of course, the Saints, kind of like Jakobi Meyers, said we're not interested in trading him for now. And now that they're 1-6 and we're getting close to the deadline, it certainly seems like the Saints will be selling. And he's on the final year of his deal. So, are you going to want to pay a big contract to like a pure deep threat in the future? Like, he's still young. He's an electric player. Maybe they do want him long term. But, they haven't extended him yet, which tells me that they've got some doubt there. So we'll see what ends up happening with Shaheed's kind of situation. But the price tag that I would be willing to pay for him, a 5th round pick, maybe round 4 pick is probably what I would do for Rashid Shaheed. I would probably go round 4 is probably what I would do for Shaheed's services. Yeah, wouldn't go as high as Olave because Olave brings route running ability to the short and intermediate levels of the field. Shaheed's more of a true deep threat. But for me, I'm going to go with a round 4 pick as my price tag for Mr. Rashid Shaheed. But another deep threat that also runs really good routes is the next guy on my list here, and that is Tennessee Titans wide receiver Calvin Ridley. All right, and I think Ridley might be a little bit more realistic than some people may think because he does have multiple years left on his contract, all these different things. But I think the reason why a Ridley trade might make some sense for Tennessee is because he's a 30-year-old receiver, and that's going to be a rebuilding team. They already fired their head coach. Do they really want an expensive, older wide receiver on their roster while they're trying to rebuild that team with Cam Ward? I mean, maybe they do, but like I would assume that if they're going to pay him all that money, they want him to be productive. And honestly, he hasn't been super productive with Cam Ward. He's kind of struggled developing a chemistry with their new franchise quarterback. All right, they're 1-6. And they're likely selling at the deadline. In fact, we know that they're selling at the deadline. And if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, like not only can you check the box of a deep threat, I mean, Calvin Ridley is one of the fastest players in the league, but also he runs really good routes. His acceleration and his burst out of his breaks is exceptional, all right? So he doesn't have the best hands in the world, so you're going to have to live with some drops. But if you're looking for somebody that can just straight up run away from people and separate versus man coverage, Calvin Ridley's one of the best in the league at doing that. And I would say for a late day 2, early day 3 pick, I would be willing to do that, all right? So 3rd round pick, 4th round pick, I would be willing to probably give up either one of those to get a guy like Calvin Ridley because he's a really freaking good football player. But the final name on my list here is Jauan Jennings. And you guys have heard me say that I think Jauan Jennings is kind of like the ideal Arthur Smith wide receiver too because of how well he run blocks. He might be the best run blocking wide receiver in all of football. Now, a big question with Jennings is whether or not he's healthy. Apparently, he's got some rib issues, and he's dealing with some lower body injuries as well, but he's continuing to play with those injuries, and I think that this makes sense for the Steelers for multiple reasons. Number one, it's a good fit for the offense, similar to kind of Jakobi Meyers, where he's a good route runner, has really good hands, had really good production last year with Brock Purdy in that 49ers offense. Also, San Francisco's getting healthier at wide receiver. Ayuk's going to be back eventually. Ricky Pearsall came back last week. They're getting Jordan Watkins back. And then also Kendrick Bourne has been absolutely thriving with Mac Jones in San Francisco this year. And he kind of plays a similar role to Jennings. So Jennings' role has certainly been decreased. He's on the final year of his deal. So the 49ers might say, hey, we got Kendrick Bourne, who's playing just as well as Jauan Jennings, if not even better right now. He's outperforming him. Why not, get rid of Jennings right now and get a draft pick for him, right? So Jennings has also had multiple contract disputes with the 49ers, so I kind of think that these two sides are a little bit tired of dealing with each other. So I think that you could probably get him for a 5th-round pick. And I think to get a guy like Jennings, who's a good route runner, really good hands, and as good of a run blocker as he is, for just a 5th-round pick, like you're spending the same amount on this guy as you paid last year for Mike Williams. All right, if that ends up being the case, I think that's a really good deal for Omar Khan and the Steelers. But obviously, the big question with him right now is whether or not he's healthy. That's certainly a big question mark at this point. So just to recap here, my tier 1 guys that I would be thrilled to add as a number 2 receiver here in Pittsburgh: Jakobi Meyers, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Calvin Ridley, and Jauan Jennings. But honestly, guys, I'm not getting my hopes up too high in terms of the Steelers actually pulling off a trade for a tier 1 wide receiver. You got to remember here, guys, that the Steelers offense really only has 2 starting wide receiver spots because they play so many heavy personnel packages. They really only have 2 starting receiver spots on this team. And they do play some 11 personnel, but it is by far and away the lowest amount in the National Football League. And whether you like Calvin Austin III as a number 2 receiver, the Steelers seem to really like him. And they kind of feel like he's comparable to, say, like a guy like Tank Dell as a really good route runner and deep threat, guy that has decent hands for his size, actually pretty darn good hands for his size. And, when you look at the depth chart and you kind of accept the fact that this Steelers offense only has 2 starting spots at wide receiver, you can make an argument if you really like Calvin Austin, like the Steelers seem to do, that there's not a whole lot of room to add like a big name wide receiver, especially when you have to give up a very precious mid-round draft pick to be able to get that player, right? So I just want to kind of temper expectations here. Personally, I would love to add great depth to this wide receiver room, and I would love for the Steelers to have the flexibility to play more 11 personnel depending on which opponents they play. Right now, they don't really have that. But I think that, the Pittsburgh Steelers kind of like their wide receiver duo to this point, and I think for the Steelers to be willing to give up a 3rd or 4th or even 5th-round pick to go get a receiver this year, they're going to have to bench Calvin Austin III, or they're going to have to play more 3 receiver sets. And I'm not sure if the Steelers really want to do either of those things. I think they like sitting in heavy personnel. I think they have kind of embraced that as their identity this year. And frankly, in an offense that runs the football a lot, prioritizes their tight ends, prioritizes DK Metcalf, can make a good argument Calvin Austin III is more than serviceable as the number 2 receiver in this offense, and it would not surprise me if the Steelers end up making that case by not making a move for a big-name receiver before the deadline. So let me know your best-case scenario down there in the comments section. What is the best wide receiver the Steelers could realistically trade for before the trade deadline this year? Let me know your thoughts down there in the comments section. For today's pinned question, just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today at Omaha Steaks. While I'm telling you about our sponsor today, get down there in the pinned question. Let me know which Steelers receiver you really want to see, or which receiver you really want to see on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, with that, let's have a word from our sponsor today at Omaha Steaks. And Omaha Steaks is the official sponsor of tailgating this football season. From legendary burgers to mouth-watering steaks, deli-style franks, and so much more, you'll elevate your next game day get-together with America's original butcher. And now with this exclusive offer, you can get $35 off at omahasteaks.com with promo code STEELERS at checkout. Terms apply. See site for details. Omaha Steaks has been America's original butcher since 1917. Every steak is perfectly aged to maximize tenderness and hand-cut by master butchers in America's heartland. Grass-fed, grain-finished beef has more marbling for exceptional flavor and is the choice of steakhouses and professional chefs around the world. Omaha Steaks offers unrivaled quality and variety, and every bite is backed by their 100% guarantee. They also carry mouth-watering burgers, chicken, pork, and seafood, plus delectable desserts. So whatever you're craving, Omaha Steaks probably has it. And guys, I absolutely love Omaha Steaks because Cassie and I love to have steak. All right, but if you know anything about steak, it can be pretty expensive. But with Omaha Steaks, you can really buy in bulk so that you can get more bang for your buck. And if you're somebody that has steak a lot, I can't recommend Omaha Steaks enough. They give you premium quality steak at great prices, and I couldn't recommend this company anymore, guys. Make game day delicious with the official sponsor of tailgating with our friends at Omaha Steaks. Today, visit omahasteaks.com and get $35 off with promo code STEELERS at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com and promo code STEELERS at checkout. Terms apply. See site for details. A big shout out to Omaha Steaks for sponsoring today's edition of Steelers Talk. So my second tier that we got for our wide receiver targets today are solid pickups. These are guys that, are maybe, borderline number 2 receivers, could be high-end number 3 guys, but they're not super expensive, but they could be contributors for the Pittsburgh Steelers this season. So we can take a look at my list here. I got Christian Kirk from the Houston Texans. All right, the Texans are struggling right now. Hollywood Brown and Tyquan Thornton with Rashid Rice and all these different guys coming back for Kansas City. Xavier Worthy's back now. There might be an odd man out in Kansas City for the right price. I think Hollywood and Tyquan are the 2 guys they might think about letting go of. And then Adonai Mitchell from Indianapolis. He seems to be in the doghouse with the Colts at this point in time. Could they potentially look to let go of him? And then Dontayvion Wicks for the Green Bay Packers. I think Romeo Doubs is safe, but you get Christian Watson and Jaden Reed back soon. You still have Savion Williams. Dontayvion Wicks might be the odd man out there in Green Bay, especially after they took Matthew Golden in the first round this past year. So, the guy on this list, though, guys, that I would say give a particularly close eye on is Christian Kirk. Now, Kirk's dealing with a hamstring injury currently, but we still have a couple of weeks before the trade deadline. And the reason why this would make sense for the Pittsburgh Steelers is because he's a good veteran slot separator. He can still separate versus man coverage, and he's still got that quickness with him and that route running acumen. Plus, he's got pretty decent hands. Plus, Pittsburgh, we know, according to reporting from Adam Schefter, that the Steelers were interested in trading for Christian Kirk last year before the trade deadline, before he had that injury with the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Texans could certainly be selling after their 2-4 start to the season. It might actually depend on if they can win or lose this next week, whether or not they'll be selling or not. And then Kirk signed a 1-year deal, and the Houston Texans have a lot of young talent. They have Jaden Higgins. They got Jalen Noel. They got a lot of guys in that wide receiver room that they really like, not to mention Tank Dell, who will be back for them, next season at least. So, I think that this is one that could make some sense if the Texans are selling. Get a draft pick out of Christian Kirk. Absolutely. And my price tag for him that I'd be willing to pay is a late round pick. Like, I'd be willing to give up a 6th round pick for Christian Kirk. He's older. He's not a dynamic threat or anything like that, but he could help this team win football games as a, he would compete with Calvin as the number 2 receiver here in Pittsburgh. But honestly, I think Calvin would beat him out. I think Calvin's slightly better than Christian Kirk is at this point, and he would be your number 3 designated slot receiver. Okay, so I think that would be a good fit for Pittsburgh, and it wouldn't be too high of a price tag. This is certainly one that I would say keep your eye on in the weeks to come. So make sure you guys click that thumbs up icon if you haven't already. If you are enjoying today's edition of Steelers Talk, we put in a lot of research to put these videos together, guys, and to give you guys the best damn Steelers coverage money can buy, 100% free on this channel every single day. So if you appreciate us, we would appreciate it if you click that thumbs up icon right now. And then the final tier that we're going to talk about today is veteran depth. Okay, and this is kind of the category here where the Steelers are just looking for somebody that, can be a rotational piece and can be a starter if there's an injury to one of, the starting players like DK Metcalf or Calvin Austin III. Because we saw what happened when Calvin Austin III went out. Scotty Miller really didn't do anything, and I thought Roman Wilson, did good things with the opportunities he was given, but obviously he wasn't given that many opportunities, right? So if there's an injury to one of your 2 starting receivers, it makes sense that the Steelers might want to go out and get somebody that they would trust as a wide receiver 3 rotational option right now, but could step into that wide receiver 2 role if there's an injury to one of their starting wide receivers. So, it costs nothing to acquire these guys pretty much. It'd be like a late round pick swap or 7th round pick in a trade, or they're just free agents. Plus it provides veteran depth without taking Calvin Austin III's starting job away from him, all right? And the reason why I think Pittsburgh may prefer this tier, even though Steelers fans definitely would not, is number 1, they can hold on to their higher draft assets in the 2026 NFL draft. We know that this Steelers front office is being very precious with their draft picks. And then number 2, they feel good about their starting wide receiver duo and tight ends. Because as we talked about before, guys, they like DK Metcalf. They like Calvin Austin III. And then, they play a lot of 12 and 13 personnel more than any other offense in the National Football League, okay? So these are the guys that I would say are in my 3rd tier. Guys that I wouldn't be super jazzed about, but I would kind of understand why they brought him in. Marquez Valdes-Scantling still has really good speed, has experience with Rodgers. He's a Super Bowl champion. He's also dealing with a little bit of an injury thing right now in his calf, but I'm kind of questioning just how legit that is. But, I digress. MVS would be someone that Aaron Rodgers would certainly want to add to this team. Allen Lazard's another name that gets thrown out there, big body guy with chemistry with Rodgers. I'm sure Rodgers wouldn't mind adding Lazard for a 7th round pick. Brandon Cooks might be my 2nd favorite option on here, or 1st favorite option. He can still run routes, and he still has tough hands. He's no longer a vertical threat, and he's not a yak threat anymore, but he's got quick feet, can run routes, and he can catch tough catches still. Tyler Lockett, I'm not really that interested in him, but I put him on here just because it's a bigger name that's available now. He's lost a step athletically, and, I don't know if he's good enough to the short and intermediate level of the field to be worth picking up here. And then I put Deontay Johnson on there. I kind of doubt the Steelers would bring him back, but, before he was traded last year in Carolina, he was putting up, legit wide receiver 2 production, and, he's just a year removed from that. So, if I'm looking at the rest of the field, OBJ and Nelson Aguilar and all these other free agents, I would say Deontay Johnson would probably have the best chance. If you're looking for a true route running threat, somebody that can separate versus man coverage, Deontay might give you the best shot there. But as I discussed, guys, really don't think they bring in Deontay Johnson. But honestly, guys, I think this category and this tier might be the most likely tier that Pittsburgh chooses. This is just not an offense that really prioritizes a big-time, big-name wide receiver, too. They play a lot of tight ends. They run the football. DK Metcalf is their featured wide receiver, and they believe in Calvin Austin III. And, the film backs that up. I really do believe that. He runs really good routes to all 3 levels of the field. He's a true deep threat. He can make tough catches. He's good after the catch as well, evidenced by his ability as a punt return man. I feel like the Steelers do have some level of belief in this wide receiver room, and I know that's not something Steelers fans want to hear, but I think it's certainly possible that that's the truth at this point. And all I got to say to you guys is you better start watching MVS highlights, because that is probably the most likely scenario at this point. So predict it for me down there in the comments section. Which wide receiver, if any, will the Steelers acquire before the NFL trade deadline this year? Do you think they go the cheap MVS option? Do you think they dive in and get Jakobi Meyers for a 4th-round pick? Is there somebody else that you think they could go get? Christian Kirk in the 6th round. I mean, 6th-round pick for Christian Kirk. Like, what are we doing if we're being precious with our 6th-round picks, right? Like, that's just my take on it. Go get somebody else that can help you out, especially if there's an injury. That's my take on it. But I think that the Steelers will probably go with somebody in that tier 3, and that will be disappointing. But I hope I'm wrong on that. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. I appreciate you guys making it to the end. I know this one was a little bit of a beast. It took a while for us to get through all 3 tiers and all that stuff, but I really do appreciate you guys supporting our channel. Make sure you click that subscribe button right now for more extensive Steelers coverage leading up to the NFL trade deadline.